Head over to the Sports on Tap hotline. We welcome in our next guest, former Florida State quarterback, and he's current Fox Sportscaster, Chris Ricks. You're on with Lee Kuveikis and Matt Dydrich in Charlotte, North Carolina. How you doing tonight?
Lee and Matt, I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing awesome, buddy.
Very good. Very good.
First question we have for you. Signing day just passed a couple days ago. It's become such a big display. You got these kids out there wearing beanies on their hats, or kind of doing like the Lee Corso thing where they put like an elephant on their hat to tell you they're going to the Alabama. What was it like when you were a senior? Just give us an idea. Your senior year in high school, maybe something crazy that you saw or you remember from your signing day.
Well, guys, in '99, the year I signed, it was a class of 2000. So right at the beginning, of the 2000s, it wasn't like it is now. It was just starting to get that way. I mean, I remember a couple of years after me, Lorenzo Booker, who was from Southern California, like myself, signed with Florida State. He had a big conference on ESPN, and I think he was one of the first guys. I mean, mine was done in the library of my high school, had my family there, friends and teammates. But looking at it now, the high schooler in me looks back and is like, man, this is pretty awesome what it's become. I always liked the camera. I always liked, big things. And I was like, man, we didn't really have it like this. But now, as a father and as a coach looking at it, it's cool, but I'm a little concerned for the guys just because of all the attention, all the expectation, and what a spectacle it is. That these expectations are so high on these kids already. I mean, we saw with Jameis Winston coming into Florida State, he was called Famous Jameis before he even stepped on the field. And the expectations on these kids because of these signing days and these press conferences is a lot. We know some will live up to it. Unfortunately, some won't. A third of every recruiting class turns out to be a bust. So it's interesting. For some of these guys, this will be the most exposure they get for the rest of their careers.
You mentioned that, and you mentioned the other day J.J. Watt said something about how it's not, you can enjoy today, but it's not.
Yep.
The most important thing is what you do next. And what you just said is basically, this is going to be the most exposure they get. Now, my question to you is, when do you see these results of these five-star athletes? I mean, is it 2-3 years down the road where we know if these are really panned out?
Well, it depends. I mean, you take a Dory Jackson last year, who was from Southern California, went to USC. I believe he was Rookie of the Year in the Pac-12, but made a big impact off the bat. Heck, we saw what Jameis Winston did after a year of redshirting. And, the word is that if E.J. Manuel, wasn't there, and because of everything he had worked up to a senior year, E.J. got the start, Jameis' freshman year. But there were people in camp saying that Jameis looked better than E.J., and he should have started as a true freshman. So, again, there'll be guys that you see them making a splash their redshirt freshman year, maybe even their true freshman year. For most of them, it's going to be 3-4 years down. After they get a redshirt year, a couple years in the system, not everyone is going to be a J.T. Barrett or a Jameis Winston. But they're becoming more and more common than they were 10, 15 years ago. And this is why, guys, because of all the specialized coaching, because of all these off-season camps. And these guys are coming into college ready to play. I still think that there'll be one or two, maybe every class, that do make a huge impact freshman, sophomore year. But you guys are seeing the preparation now. It's so different than it was 10 to 15 years ago because these guys are working with professionals while they're in high school.
We're talking with Chris Ricks, former Florida State quarterback. You mentioned that when you were coming out that there wasn't a big it wasn't a big display and everything. The other thing that's big now is where these players are ranked, nationally and then by their position, and then are they a 5-star, a 4-star, a 3-star, so forth. Do you remember where you were your senior year just as far as a ranking goes?
Yeah, again, those rankings were not what they are today. It's different. And I want to say I was a 4-star out of 5. I mean, I don't even remember. I was considered one of the top guys from California, and what a tremendous honor it was for Bobby Bowden to come out of the South, which he doesn't need to do. You guys know it's staying in Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, all of the southern states. But somehow him and Coach Mark Richt, who we know is now at Georgia, got a hold of one of my highlight tapes from playoffs in my junior year, and they came in with an offer. And UCLA and USC were struggling in the late 90s. Their coaches were on their way out. And meanwhile, Florida State's number one. Then you get a young high school kid who kind of wants to get away from home and away from dad. And that's why I went to Florida State. And there was a lot of challenges, ups and downs, but at the end of the day, a lot more memorable times. And to play for who I still consider the all-time winningest coach in college football was a privilege to be playing for Coach Bowden at the time where we passed Joe Pa, and then a few years later Joe Pa passed Bowden back. But just what great memories to start for 4 years for him and that program. It's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, awesome, Chris. So I know we all watched a lot of college football this year. Two big names, Mariota, Winston. What are the biggest differences in them two, and who do you think goes first in the draft?
Yeah, such a great question. There's both great athletes, but they do it in such a different way, guys. As we see from Mariota getting outside the pocket, more throwing on the run. And even though Jameis does a little spread stuff, he's the most pocket-ready quarterback in this draft. That's what Jimbo does, and that's why he's been able to develop such great quarterbacks. I mean, people could say what they want about what they've done in the NFL, whether it be Christian Ponder, whether it be E.J. Manuel. Heck, look what he did with Clint Trickett at West Virginia, one of the best quarterbacks the past few years, who started at Florida State before he moved on. And Jameis will be the same. I wouldn't be surprised if Jameis is the number one pick. I don't think he will be. I think he'll definitely be a first-rounder and a first-day pick. But I wouldn't be surprised to see, Tampa Bay go with Mariota, just trusting him a little bit more with their system. We still know about some of the off-field stuff, but they both do so many things so well in their skill sets, whether it's inside the pocket, outside the pocket. It all depends what kind of system, they're going to be going into. But I think both of them will make an impact in the league and probably earlier than expected.
I'm a diehard Florida State fan. The first quarterback I remember for Florida State was Chris Winkie. Honestly,
Yeah.
You're probably my favorite Florida State quarterback ever. I'm not going to lie. Winston probably nudged. Winston probably.
You don't have to say that just because I'm on.
I was going to say was Winston probably nudged you honestly a little bit in the last year, but his off the field issues have made it completely different as far as my wife goes and my son. So there's no doubt that he'll never wear a Winston jersey. So my question to you is, the off the field issues, does that matter to NFL teams, and how much does it matter?
Well, it's interesting, and I had off-the-field stuff, too. When you're growing up in front of the country, a young kid, we know traditionally guys would start at Florida State when they're juniors, redshirt juniors. Outside of Chris Winkie, who started, I believe, when he was 28 years old, they're still college guys, and growing up in front of the country. So, sure, would you like to see Jameis make different decisions? Everyone would, including himself. At the end of the day, no, I can't. I started as a redshirt freshman, as Jameis did, but I can't imagine, what he went through at times, winning a national title his freshman year, winning a Heisman Trophy, not even the microscope, just a telescope on this guy was amazing. And, I do think that he's going to get it if he hasn't already. He knows this is a business now. But as far as the NFL, it's interesting, guys. I still don't have the answer to that because they say that character is the number one thing they look at, right? But every year we see guys that doesn't match up with their policy. So, we know the NFL is about money. It's about results. Look, Manziel, you would have thought there were so many red flags. Cleveland takes him in the first round, but now what's happening with him going to rehab. So, it's a risk. It depends on the organization. It depends on the program. But at the end of the day, teams need to win, and they're going to bring in that talent that they think will help them win. The question is, does the talent outweigh the liability that these players can be at times?
Yeah, I agree with you a lot, and I got one more just follow-up to that a little bit. Do you think there's anything that colleges may be able to do a little bit better to kind of groom these kids pretty much into young men as they grow in the college and in the college system? We all know colleges, parties, and all that. Is there anything that they could do probably a little bit better?
Well, that's a loaded question because the first part of me would say, yes, they can. Don't just use these kids. Get people around them, counselors, maybe even people from the outside, neutral parties that are going to help protect your players, protect them from, people that are going to be pulling at them, making sure they're taking care of their classroom stuff. making sure that they're making smart decisions on the weekends. You'd like to see the school do a little bit more than just push them through school and use them for the money that they can make the school. On the other hand, I know Bobby Bowden, whether you're Bobby Bowden or whether you're a first-year coach, you can't babysit these kids. They're college kids. You've got your own families to worry about as coaches. They're let alone game planning, meetings, recruiting. You can't do it all for them. You got to let them know the rules, let them know the consequences to the rules. And at the end of the day, these are kids, but they're also young adults, and they have to be, as I learned, as Jameis has learned, as hundreds and thousands of college athletes learn every year. You can do whatever you want, but there will be consequences to your actions.
All right, outside of Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, another guy who's entering the draft this year is Amari Cooper from Alabama. Is he the real deal at the wide receiver position? It surprises me that there's an Alabama guy and an SEC guy in general that is that big of a wide receiver that's good.
Yeah, I think he will be because, he reminds me of the Julio Joneses. Reminds you of the A.J. Greens. He's got the measurables. Even when teams would double cover him, he'd find a way to get a double move or get separation. He comes from a very good system, even though he had only 1 year with Lane Kiffin. It's a pro-style system. We saw what receivers have done out of USC that Kiffin had, whether it's Marquise Lee, whether it's Robert Woods. So, yeah, is he going to be a Megatron? Is he going to be a Calvin Johnson? Yeah, maybe not. But I think he will work his way into one of the premier receivers in the league just because of his height, because of his ball skills, because of his speed, and the fact that he played against some of the best competition every single week for 2 or 3 seasons. So I think Amari Cooper is going to make some noise, not only within years to come, but I think in his rookie year.
Chris, you run the talk a little bit about you for a little bit. You run the Champion Training Academy out there in California right now. Is there anybody that, I don't know what age groups these guys are, but I mean, is there anybody there you see that kind of stands out above the others and you're like, this is a lot of potential in this young person right here?
Yeah, we started Champion Training back in 2005. After I got done with the Chargers, I wanted to start a school for quarterbacks and not just teach them what to do, but what not to do. I was fortunate to play for Mark Richt and Bobby Bowden, obviously, and some great coaches at Florida State. But I learned through the School of Hard Knocks not just what to do to be successful, but also things you shouldn't do. So that's really what we try to teach, things to do, things not to do, learning from our coaches' mistakes and wanting them to be better than us. So for the past 11 years, it's been a great privilege to work with a lot of athletes. We started with just quarterbacks. Now we do all positions. We just had a linebacker sign with Harvard this past week from Bishop Vermont High School, one of the high schools that I went to. His name's Anthony Camargo. So, inner city kid going to Harvard. Couldn't be more proud for him. And then a couple quarterbacks from out here. One of them named Matt Fink from Glendora High School, who's offered from Boise State. I think he'll be a big recruit next year. And then KJ Costello from the high school that I graduated from, Santa Margarita. Big kid. Jimbo has offered him along with a lot of other schools around the country. So, as far as quarterbacks, Matt Fink and KJ Costello are a couple names that you'll be hearing in the next few years. I don't know if KJ is going to want to take the same track I did and go all the way across the country to Florida State. He may be a USC or UCLA guy, but I'm trying to do everything I can to see him go to Tallahassee and continue to do big things there.
Awesome stuff. 2 last things before we get you out of here. Outside of not winning a national championship, that's the obvious choice, but outside of that, what is one thing that you wish that you would have achieved while you were a Florida State Seminole?
Oh, it's a great question. Outside of the national title, I was thankful to get my degree. That was a miracle in itself. But I would probably say a Heisman Trophy. That is a dream, especially when you follow a Heisman Trophy winner in Chris Weinke, and you see that you've got the same coach that helped him get it in Mark Richt. And then he ended up taking that Georgia job, which was something he had to do, and was so happy for him. But, you still have dreams about doing that and following in the Charlie Wards and the Chris Weinkes. But if I had to pick between both of those, it definitely would have been a national title. And it was great to see Jimbo Fisher and the staff bring it back there next year. And I wouldn't be surprised in the next few years after you get a new quarterback broken in with the way him and his staff is recruiting. Florida State will probably get another one in the next 3 to 5 years.
Awesome, Chris. It's been great talking with you today. Right before we let you go, though, what we do with all of our guests is we ask you to give a last call, which is basically just a shout-out to anything you'd like to. Chris Ricks, what would be your last call today?
My last call would just be to, Noel Nation. It's great to get out there every few years, and I hope to be back in Tallahassee sooner than later, whether it's coming for a game, whether it's doing a football camp. We've done some football camps there. So hopefully you guys, they stay up on WarChan and all the Florida State athletic sites for the next time we're doing a camp out there, and just always appreciate the support from the loyal fans that Florida State has. It was a privilege playing there for 4 years.
Awesome stuff, Chris. Thanks for joining us. If you're ever in Charlotte, North Carolina, hopefully we'll get you back on again soon. But if you're ever in Charlotte, North Carolina, hopefully we'll get you in studio. All right, buddy?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Matt. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Chris.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you.